Welcome to the Forge.
Hello Gamer Nation, I'm Jim Hurley and welcome to this, the first of our video series for the Forge and Genesys Role Playing Game podcast, where we will take the time to teach you the basics of the Genesys Role Playing Game. Okay, so first, before we get into any of the rules of the game, let's cover off on one thing. What is a role-playing game? Now, it's easy for me as a veteran gamer of over 35 years to assume that you, the viewer, knows what a role-playing game, or an RPG as it's called, is. So instead, I'm going to cover off on that first. Now, to sum up what an RPG is, I like to use this analogy. A role-playing game is participating in a form of make-believe with rules to help arbitrate the outcome of circumstances encountered during the game. Now, when we talk make-believe, I just want to point out that this is not where you dress up in the character that you control. That is a type of role-playing game where that occurs, but that's called live action role-play, and sometimes they don't even dress up. Perhaps you've also heard of it as called LARPing. But that's a story for a different time, and it's not what the Genesys RPG is all about. Now, a role-playing game, as the name suggests, is a game for two or more participants, and each player at the table has a player character, also referred to as a PC, and the player controlling that character takes on that role. Now, with Genesys, what that character is will depend greatly on the setting that you're playing in. If you're playing in a fantasy setting like Realms of Terranoth, you might be playing an orcish noble, a human cutthroat, an elven warrior, or any number of heroes ready for medieval adventures. Conversely, in Shadows of the Beanstalk, a very cyberpunk style setting, you might be playing a clone computer hacker, a cybernetic heavy, an overzealous human investigator, or any number of characters attempting to make ends meet in the rough and tumble city of New Angeles. But if you've created your own setting, which is something that Genesys does in spades, your character should suit that setting. Now, we'll get on to creating settings much further down the track. Now, in a role-playing game, each character has a character sheet. This lists your character's vital statistics, their skills, any special abilities they might have, their motivations and backgrounds, gear and talents. Now, using these elements, the players gain an understanding of what the characters can do, how they can do it, how well they do it, and how they fit into their group of fellow characters as they ready themselves to engage in the story being played out. But who's running all this, you might ask? Who makes up the story you're going to be playing in? Well, these are a special type of player, and they're called the Game Master, or GM. The GM is the eyes and ears of the characters. They explain what player characters see, what they feel and smell, hear and touch. They're a combination of guide, adversary, ally, storyteller, and manager all rolled into one. They adjudicate what the other people and beings of the world do. They make judgments on rules, craft the adventures and stories, and generally run the game. It might all sound very intimidating, but really it's not, and it's a lot of fun. The difference between most role-playing games and Genesys, however, is that the players have a much more impactful presence in the game. Now, what I mean by that is that Genesys is a narrative role-playing game, and the players have a much greater selection of options available to them in crafting the world during the game and the elements around them. Now, primarily, this comes from two places, the dice and the story point pool. Now, we'll touch base on those in a later episode. Now, in a role-playing game, after players have created their characters, a game master will start a session of play with something like you and your companions have been lounging around the riverbank since late afternoon. Each of you have been practicing your skills and newfound abilities with your mentors and have met up with your friends to share your experiences. Suddenly, you hear a distant trumpet. You think that it's coming from the logging mill, and that normally means an emergency of some kind. You're a lot closer than any of the other townsfolk, and you ponder your options. The horn sounds again, and then which seems to be more frantic this time, so what do you do? Now, this sets the tone of the session and immediately gives the players a choice. Many of you would have heard about Choose Your Own Adventure books, where something is described, and then you were given several options to choose from. Choose option 1 and you turn to a specific page. choose option 2 and you go to a different page. You read some more and then you were given more options. You get the picture anyway. Role-playing games are similar, but they are more open-ended with literally endless options. In the industry, we call this a sandbox, where you are free to go wherever you want your character to go. Okay, so let's get back to our example. So in this scenario, the GM has let the players know what is going on and has asked each of the players what they want to do. Each player then tells the GM what their character does. Now, depending on what that is, the GM determines what risks there are in doing that, if any. They may decide that they want to run to the mill. The GM may just say then that they run there and arrive shortly after. But equally, they may ask for a skill check to cover that distance. Skills such as athletics and coordination may be appropriate, as might survival or knowledge, geography, depending on how the players describe how their characters get to where they want to go. Now, this process continues on throughout the game and involves elements of storytelling, play acting, improvisation, puzzle solving, social interactions with other GM-controlled characters, which are called non-player characters or NPCs, and potentially combat with deadly foes. A gaming session typically will run for 3 to 4 hours. The GM should craft their story to suit, ending the session on a cliffhanger or upon resolution of a story. Again, that's a topic for another time. Well, there you have it. That's what a role-playing game is. Hopefully you've learned something from that. If you would like to know more about how to play the Genesys role-playing game, you can listen to the Forge, a Genesys RPG podcast, or by watching any of our subsequent videos. If this video was helpful, please consider subscribing to this channel. You can also leave us a review, ask us questions, or let us know some of your experiences in this topic in the comments below. If you're old school like me, you can send us an email to forgegenesis@d20radio.com. And don't forget both Facebook and Twitter, where you can find us at ForgeGenesis. Well, again, hopefully that's helped. That's a wrap. I'm Jim Hurley. Let your triumphs be many and your despairs be few. And remember, the Forge Podcast helping you hone your gaming edge.